Good evening and welcome. Welcome back to Let's Talk Radio with a Y, R-A-D-Y-O. This is the DeFi Collective, and we talk about anything having to do with blockchain, DeFi, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, surveillance capitalism, and various other things. Today we have a great show. What we're going to talk about today, we get a lot of comments, and one of the comments that we're hearing, is people will say, oh, that Bitcoin, it sounds real cool. And, I know people can make money and I kind of get the DeFi thing, but what does this mean for me? What do I have skin in the game? What is this going to mean for me? What are the implications? So today we're going to give some tangible examples, and we're going to talk about the implications, the practical implications of DeFi, blockchain, and surveillance capitalism. And we'll begin by introducing ourselves. I'm Robert Vaughn, and the other half of our hosting compilation or hosting person is Alex Jewell. Alex is a front-end developer, and he's sort of the go-to guy here. When I don't know what I'm talking about, he kind of pulls me out of the soup. So we'll get going. But for instance, we'll get started with DeFi. DeFi is short for decentralized finance. And what decentralized finance is just what it says. Typically in the world, the global financial system, you have a bank, you have centralized finance, you have an institution or an investment company that sort of handles all the finance. One of some of the impetus for DeFi is because there's some flaws of what's called the global financial system. In a capitalistic system, there's a global financial system that consists of different banks. The Bank of Hong Kong, the Federal Reserve Bank. The UK has a bank. China has a bank. Russia has a bank, and there's 7 or 8 different banks, I believe, that compose the global financial system, and they have a set of agreements that this currency would be worth so much versus this currency. But it's opened up a lot of can of worms. There's a lot of problems. Some of them are that billions of people, about 2 billion adults in the world, don't participate in the banking system. Of course, in the more industrialized countries such as the United States, Canada, the UK, and Australia, it's about 70% of people that participate in banking. But when you look around the world, there's 2 billion people that don't participate in the banking system for a lot of reasons. A lot of it is they feel they don't have enough money. A lot of it is access. A lot of it's education that they just don't know. That the global financial system works. For instance, the Federal Reserve Bank is not a government institution; it's a private corporation. So it operates a little differently. And once you understand that, then a lot of things start to make sense. So financial literacy remains kind of low globally. There a high cost of banking. If you try to transfer money, or not just transfer money, but say you want to wire money, it costs a lot of money to wire money. I mean, give me a break. This is electronic, man. You push a button and it goes
and it can take a while too. It's also
and it can take a while. That's what I never understood.
Money is not immediate.
Oh man, you want to say, well, I want to move this money. Like I used to be in the car business, and we'd sell cars to different parts of the world. High-end cars. And, it take 8 hours for the money. And I'm saying, now why does it take that long for some money to get transferred?
There's 6 middlemen.
Yeah, and everybody gets
to verify the transaction, right?
Yeah. Yep. Everybody gets a piece of the action, and the transactions are slow. So that's a problem. Yeah. And then, a lot of people, my grandmother, until the day she died, never trusted a bank because she experienced the crash of 29. She was lucky enough. She got, I think, 75 cents on the dollar, which she got her money out of Quincy Savings and Loans in Cleveland, Ohio. So she never really trusted banks. And there's a lot of hokey pokey that goes on. Also, there's a lot of global inequity. in the banking system and the way wealth is created. And, there's, currency manipulation. I think I won't have to call it the country, but everybody knows who's a master of that, and financial censorship. So there's a lot of reasons that make DeFi or decentralized finance attractive, and what it is, it's sort of it's an emerging alternative to the global financial system. It created massive wealth for those connected to the financial centers, but the people that are connected and middlemen made a lot of money. And I think this year or last year in 2020, for the first time in 30 years, the middle class shrunk worldwide by 150 million people. But it created 493 new billionaires. A few people, Bezos, Elon Musk, Zuckerberg. There are a few billionaires that actually doubled their wealth. I think Larry Ellison was one too. So what we see is a wealth concentration at the top. The middle class is kind of going away, and pretty soon there's going to be nobody to make money from, because all the people with all the money will have all the money.
And we've been tricked into measuring our success by how well the rich are doing, right? Which makes absolutely no sense, right? You could look at any country and look at just the rich people, be like, wow, they're doing pretty well, right? You could look at the worst countries in the world, and if you only concentrated on the rich, you wouldn't see any problems, right?
Yeah, you think it was great.
Wow, everybody's doing pretty well.
It was, and it's funny too, because when we think about poverty, in Cleveland, Ohio, or in Jackson, Mississippi, is very different than poverty in Haiti or say the Dominican Republic. And I know whenever I travel outside the country, the few times that I have, I always like to say, hey, take me into the city. I want to take me to the hood. I want to ride by and see. Right. And it's a whole different level of poverty than what we experience, here in this country. So, there are vast disparities in wealth, and this is, I think, an unsustainable situation, because pretty soon, if you take it to its logical conclusion, then 25 people will have all the money, nobody else will have any. So what do you do then?
Yep.
How do you run an economy then? So it's pretty crazy. So I'm going to ask Alex to kind of speak on some of the practical implications of some of the blockchain things, such as DeFi, surveillance capitalism, and some of the tangible examples. Like I had a gentleman ask me the other day, he says, yeah, this is all well and good, but what does it mean? What does this mean to me? I'm in the construction business. What does this mean to me? So Alex, you want to speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think this is a question we've kind of gotten a few times, and we've really talked about the financial system a lot, but blockchain is so much more even than just banking functionality. Really, like, understanding tangibly what that means for the average person. They just don't have, not a lot of people are really going through the examples of, pretty much how it affects every industry. Even online advertising, when you talk about things like surveillance capitalism, online advertising is one of the largest beasts out there that takes advantage of our data. And so you think of an example like the Brave browser, which you literally get paid to see advertisements. It's the reversal of ownership, and it's a reversal of who gets paid for the value that they're contributing, right? If I'm contributing value as a consumer, if the value of advertising is in me seeing it, then I deserve compensation in that relationship, right? And so when we start changing things and decentralizing them so that we are the ones with power, right? Like everybody collectively has power over the system, then you have a system where we get compensated for the things that individuals at the top only used to get compensated for, and it was at our expense, right? And so that's a really great example. But it goes, way beyond that. Your example of like logistics or shipping or construction companies, the logistics of these companies suffer very much by the middlemen, right? They suffer because of lack of transparency. They suffer because of lack of consistency, or cohesiveness, or transparency in terms of pricing. They suffer in terms of like large inefficiencies in supply chain. And all of these things are fixed by distributed ledgers. They're fixed by having transparency of the system, where you don't have to rely on some like brokerage or something in the middle to say, oh, well, we're going to charge this extra on top because we're the ones in the middle who have visibility on this side of the supply chain. And because you're shipping through us, or you're getting supplies through us, we're going to charge 20 or 30%. And you're not even going to know because you're just relying on us to be in the middle and do the work for you. When you have transparency of the system, of the ledger, then all of those middlemen go away. You no longer have the necessity for them because all of it's automated. All of these transactions are immediate and transparent. And it starts reducing not just cost, but if it starts increasing efficiency of the system. We talked about politics on an episode, healthcare, real estate, and that's when you talk about things like fractional ownership. Being able to fractionally own and manage the logistics of people fractionally owning buildings and land and entities. The decentralization of it gives us ownership again. But I think the best example that I brought up right before we started recording, I was in a chat the other day, and this guy was like, hey, I just quit my job and started this company. And I went and looked at the website, and it said, open a savings account, 6% APY. It doesn't mention anything about crypto or blockchain, anything about DeFi. And so I responded and I was like, hey, how are you doing 6% APY without decentralization, without blockchain? And he said, it is DeFi. I think what we're going to start seeing is a lot of things packaged to the consumer in terms of just what it does for you. And behind the scenes, it's using blockchain. And we're already seeing that. Companies like Amazon already have internal blockchain. Companies like Chase already have internal blockchain. Healthcare companies already have internal blockchain.
Goldman Sachs.
There's already things happening where blockchain is changing the fabric of how companies profit. And what we have to be cognizant of is like, how do we take advantage of blockchain for ourselves so that companies don't just jump in and because they can't beat it, they take advantage of it and still maintain control because they're using it to maintain control, right? You look at an Amazon, a company like Amazon right now is using blockchain so that their logistics are faster, so that they are still destroying competition, right? They're still destroying the small stores. They're still controlling controlling these small e-commerce online presences by individuals because they can get something to you in 2 hours, right? And they're able to do that because of blockchain at the end of the day, but they're hiding it. They're keeping it to themselves internally, and you don't even know.
Yeah, data, just a word or two about surveillance capitalism. Surveillance capitalism is the acquisition of your personal experience that's quantized into data, and the quality and quantity is depicted by data, and the data is then sold, or it's used to advertise to you, to make you buy things, to make certain people win certain elections, to create certain opinions about certain issues. And what happened, this all happens with algorithms. So it's almost like there's like a robot making these decisions, and there's no real human intervention to how these decisions get made. For instance, if you say, hey, I think Alex is a great guy, then you're going to start attracting other people to say, hey, I think Alex is a great guy. But, if you say, I don't like Alex, then you're going to be directed on your social media to people that don't like Alex. So pretty soon you're going to think your whole world doesn't like Alex. And I think we can see this, if you look at the last year, there was a lot of, what it does, it pushes people to extreme views. It's no It's not happenstance. It just didn't happen. That if you look around the world, a lot of politics is moving to the far right. Uh, you have people that are kind of going to their corner, so to speak, like a boxing match, and there's no. It used to be like a middle, and it's almost like no middle now. And a lot of that is because of surveillance capitalism and the algorithms that send you what you like to see. If you like a certain position, then they're going to send you things that support that position. And in your world of what you see and what you hear, you're going to think everybody thinks like you do. And if anybody doesn't, if you talk to people on opposite ends of the political spectrum, I mean, there's like no compromise. Those guys are crazy. Those guys are crazy. And, surveillance capitalism is one of the reasons that it got that way.
Right.
And something else to keep in mind is that this is not just a phenomenon to the United States. Facebook is worldwide.
Yeah, look at Brexit.
Yeah,
Brexit is the perfect example
Okay.
of our Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica is what created the Trump right in America. It was a complete, like, they took advantage of the advertising system built into Facebook. The fact that it's algorithmic, it was taken advantage of illegally. And look what happened here. But when you look at how Brexit happened and how a bunch of public opinion shifted to support it, it was the same exact methodology.
Yep. Same exact methodology. Yep. And it happens in a lot of different countries. It happened in France. France was sort of on the brink of kind of falling really to the right. We had the yellow vest protests, and it's happened a lot in a lot of countries. In Brazil, it happened in Venezuela, so this is something that, I don't even know if the people at the top of the Facebook and Google really know how to control it. And I think that they don't really care. It's because they're making so much money. Amazon too. Right. Amazon's a major player in surveillance capitalism, and they're making so much money that it really, secondary, what the repercussions and implications are.
Why do you think Amazon is not just an online store? I don't know if a lot of people may not realize this.
Where are they making money?
Owns AWS, Amazon Web Services, and now large portions of the entire internet are hosted on Amazon servers. And what that means is that Amazon has access to copious amounts of public data, even just whatever is put on their servers that's accessible, they have access to that data. And you agree to those terms, where Amazon can essentially, in a lot of cases, they can derive conclusions from the data of all these other websites. But not just that, cookies from those websites can then be used on top of it. When you go to Amazon, Amazon is getting into the business of knowing where you're driving, where you're eating, pretty much every aspect of our lives. A company like Amazon profits off of knowing those things. And so, you really look at these players and you're like, okay, Facebook's not just a social media platform, right? Wow. Amazon's not just a bookstore.
Amazon, when you talk about the cloud, you're talking about Amazon.
Right. Yeah. You don't have a lot of, there's not a lot of competition in terms of like, where do I host my very large website, especially for like the larger websites. I mean, you look at like when AWS outages happen, you look at the 10 or 15 very large websites you use every day that go down or have problems, right? And it's because they're all using AWS in some way or another.
Yeah. And keep in mind too, this is not just here in this country, this is worldwide. So a lot of things that are happening here are happening in other places. But surveillance capitalism, all these things have social implications, for society, in elections, in your privacy, and DeFi, decentralized finance, and blockchain is sort of, I kind of see it as an antidote to surveillance capitalism. And things are kind of moving in that direction ever so slightly. I know beginning next month, um, Apple iOS 14.5 update, you will have to give an app permission to monitor your data.
Yep.
If you have a smartphone beginning next month, you will be able to not give them permission to monetize your data, because they take your data and they sell this information and they monetize it in order to make money off of you, and you don't see any of that money. So I think Apple, Tim Cook has not exactly been great friends with Mark Zuckerberg. I think because they have different philosophies, about how the role of big tech, for instance. So this update is really it's gonna hurt Facebook in the pocketbook. I think it's really, I don't like to prognosticate with stocks.
Well, that's why Facebook's suing them.
Yeah, that's why Facebook's suing them. Because they know it's game over, man.
Right. Well, because Facebook is fully reliant on their advertising revenue.
Right.
And their advertising revenue is as lucrative as it is because of our data. And so if it is opt-in, if I have to decide it's okay as an individual for Facebook to use my data that way, in the way that they make all of their money, they're going to lose. I mean, most people are going to be like, no, you can't.
I can see 98% of people that know about it, that have an iPhone, are not going to allow these apps to
your iPhone's
monetize
like, hey,
their data.
Can Facebook use your data in the background? You're going to be like, why do they need to use my data in the background? Right. Most people are just going to be like, no, you can't. Like, what do I get out of that? Like, why is that useful for me?
Yeah. And it's a matter, it's funny. I remember reading the book, George Orwell, 1984, where they thought 1984 was going to be when the government, government surveillance kind of took over. But the concept was kind of on point, but all this time people were fear of the government, but it wasn't the government, it's the major corporations.
Which unfortunately a lot of the government has simply turned into a tool for them, right? So in a sense, 1984 was predictive in how government would be corrupted, but it didn't predict that the free market itself would have so many conflict of interests in terms of our own well-being, that the real governance would be coming. It would be top down from the corporations, right? The corporations use the government to manage policy that's in their favor, right? I mean, Apple's a good example here, because even though Apple doesn't profit off of our data per se, Apple profits off of still manipulation of the market and control of the market. I mean, you even look at how Apple doesn't allow you to fix your own phone or your laptop. I mean, you look at like forced obsolescence, right? Which is the idea of your stuff will break on its own, forced. They're forcing your things to break at a certain point, and then they make it too expensive to get it fixed. You might as well buy a new one, and then you have to buy a new one, right? So
that's why I think they're the most profitable company in the world, right?
Their business model is, well, even if your stuff still works 10 years from now, we don't want it to. So 2 years from now, it's just going to stop working. A component's going to break. And then you're going to have to ask us how much it is to fix it. And we're going to be like, well, that's $800, but for $1,500, you can get, you know what I mean? Like, their business model is just as, that centralized control Apple has is still problematic for the market and for our freedom. And, and this puts like little shops out of business that fix things, right? There's like a guy in New York who's had so many lawsuits with Apple, and he owns like a small iPhone fix-it place. And he will sit in court with the people that Apple's bought out, and he will rally. But I suggest anybody look up some of these court cases, because I mean, they're kind of long, but Apple's lawyers frame it like, we're doing this to help the consumer because we don't want the consumer like messing with something that'll break it. Like, we can't promise quality if the consumer's allowed in there. Like, it's all about, they frame it like they're helping us, like we can't take care of our own products, and to like you know, in some sense, some people have really bought into that lie. So, you know, decentralization is going to be really important, even in terms of the hardware we use, right? Even in terms of how our devices connect, and how these companies have to adapt if they want to survive, to allowing us to have more control over our finances, over our devices, over our data. And I think companies like Apple are starting to, they're starting to realize it a little bit more, that those things matter to us.
Yeah, I think it's decentralized finance and decentralized control. You know,
Right.
would be a way to put it too. You know, blockchain and DeFi, one of the things that it does is it kind of takes the middleman out of the equation. And that's kind of, I think that's a good thing. You know, for instance, I'll give you, I've had some experience in the music business. In the music business, Alex is a great guitar player. So he makes a song, you know, he writes a tune. I said, man, I like this. You know, we'll put some lyrics with it, and, you know, we'll get it up on social media. We'll make a video, blah, blah, blah. And then we'll get it going, you know, we'll give it to the bloggers, and we'll get you going. Okay. So Alex says, okay, get me a deal. I said, okay, well, I'm going to sign you to Russell Entertainment Group, which is my label. So I take my label and I say, well, you know what? I said, I'm going to take this to Island Def Jam. Because I don't have the resources to distribute music. And Island Def Jam says, yeah, okay, we like you. Alex said, we'll sign you. He says, now we're going to take this to Warner Music Group, because they're sort of at the top of the food chain. So what happens is Warner Music Group always going to take 51%, or Sony, for instance, Sony ATV, because they're going to do your publishing too. So they're going to get 51%. Then Island Def Jam, since they're bigger than I am, they're going to probably take 20%. So that's 71%. You know, I'll take 15% or 20%. So that's 91%. So there's 9% left for Alex. And he creates music. And that's the way the music business runs, you know. And
Right.
if you know, if when he can make a lot of money, you know, if you get, you know, 25 or 30% of a record that sells millions, you know, millions of copies, is still a lot of money. I mean, the numbers.
You had the merch platforms, you had the streaming platforms, you had the venues, you had, like, you know, like certain contractors and all this stuff into the mix. And at the end of the day, what am I, you know, I'm taking home, you know, like, absolutely. People have this misconception that the large amount they front load, how much an artist gets, the moment that they sign them, to convince them to do it, because everybody else makes out for the rest of the time afterwards. Yeah. So if they can front load, you know, $1 million for this artist, and the artist is like, oh yeah, I'm all in. If I'm getting $1 million now, like, look at me in 2 years, right? And 2 years later, that artist has run out of money. They've had to buy their own stuff on the road. And
forget about recoupment. You got to pay that money back. They front you. Right. First album doesn't pay it, the second and third one does. Yeah.
Right. And then if you know, God forbid you don't uphold your terms of the agreement, in terms of like, oh, I didn't put out the right amount of songs, they didn't like the songs that I'd written to put out, the streaming platforms didn't meet the goals, I wasn't posting enough on a certain social media platform that I had promised in the contract, right? The moment that any of those little contractual terms are lost, you are, as an artist, definitely not entitled to any more compensation, and they're still profiting off of everything you've created.
That's right.
You know, every industry looks like this, right? You look at like the real estate industry, and it's the same thing. You look at the healthcare industry, and it's the same thing. And I think, like, you know, when really the theme of today is like, how does this tangibly affect everybody's lives? And you look, one of the things I wanted to bring up was like the country of Estonia, where the country of Estonia, which is a very small European country that most people know very little about, Estonia has between like 91 and 99% of their healthcare and prescription records on blockchain technology now. That means that as a patient in Estonia, I can use whatever infrastructure technology platforms that have been created, and all of my medical records and my prescription records and all of that can be shared equally between my doctors, other medical professionals, my family members, and all of the logistics of that, which in the US is a logistical nightmare involving 20 middlemen and, you know, billions and billions of dollars. In Estonia, it's like you've got the decentralized record. It's a ledger of everybody's healthcare records. It's encrypted and anonymous, but it's also fully transparent in how it works. And I have full ownership as a patient in terms of who gets to see it, but there's no obstacles in terms of sharing it with the right people. You know, how many people deal with like, I have a record over in this healthcare system from 10 years ago that's been lost, and I have to share it with this other healthcare system, and nobody's in communication and they can't figure it out. And my doctor at this new place has no clue of what my full medical history looks like.
Mhm.
And a lot of people die from this very logistical nightmare.
Yeah, don't have a medical condition and have to go to the hospital 3 states over.
Right.
You're liable to be dead by the time they get the information to them,
Right.
get the record. Yeah.
So these are the things where, like, in a healthcare system, you may not care what blockchain does. You may not care how it works. But in that system, like in Estonia now, where people's lives are probably being saved by the mere simplicity of this and the transparency of it and the ownership of it, that's a big deal, right?
And
every industry
cheap.
is affected that way.
It's cheap. Yeah, it's cheap. Healthcare costs are driving the national debt probably greater than any other cost. Because, everybody is subjected to the increases in healthcare costs.
Right.
I would propose, Alex, instead of, signing with most of the money too, just getting back to the music business for a minute, most of the money now is made from streaming, but artists get very low of that money. Every label now makes over 60 to 70% of their revenue from streaming, because that's how people listen to music. Why should I don't want to buy Drake's album when I can just stream the song when I want to hear it. So one of the things the blockchain will probably be doing very soon with music, when Alex writes a song, he can upload it on the blockchain with a contract that says if you want to listen to the song, it costs you a half a penny. So if I want to listen to Alex's song, I just turn on my radio and I play the song, and a half a penny gets transferred from my Ethereum account or my Bitcoin account to Alex. So with this, taking all the middlemen out of the way, there's no, me getting publishing, there's no Island Def Jam getting 25%, there's no, Warner Music Group getting 51%. Alex is getting his money for the work that he created.
There's no streaming platform pool where it's half fake streams that record companies have bought because they're going to make more back when they have the highest percentage of streams when that pot from Spotify is split up, right? None of that is even possible. Because all of it's transparent and everybody's verified on chain in terms of who's listening to it.
And the creator of the art actually gets compensated for creating the art.
Right.
It's kind of like you do a painting, it sells for 50 million bucks, but you get 25 cents,
Yeah.
And a label, people say, well, Whitney Houston was signed for $100 million. And at that time, that was an unheard of contract for an artist to get signed for $100 million. Clive Davis with Jive Records made over $2 billion on her from the time they signed that contract till she passed away. So if somebody told me you invest 100 million for 2 billion, that's a pretty good return on your money. And that's just what they said. And then when an artist passes away, they make more money on you after you're gone.
No.
Because then they don't have to pay you. And your estate ends up fighting for 10 years, and then they'll give you, when you get good and broke, they'll give you 10 or 15 million dollars after they made 10 or 15 billion.
And all of that on the blockchain is protected, right? Your royalties are protected. You never lose your royalties. Who gets those royalties after your death are protected. Those can be smart contracts. So there's no room even most of the time for any sort of like disagreement or dragging things through court. I mean, imagine the court system may just, when everything's decentralized, the court system may just dissolve, honestly, because like you're going to have like some civil cases. You might have obviously like criminal cases you'll have, but like in terms of like, oh, who gets what and like who owns what, you're going to lose all of these cases. None of them are going to exist anymore because there's not going to be a dispute.
You're right. Yeah.
So,
and then attorneys will have to, you probably won't need so many attorneys because a lot of things will get decided. There won't be a need for as much litigation. you know.
Really, real estate, right? A lot of these industries, attorneys are such an integral part to even them hashing out deals and figuring out
Mhm,
what are the, you know, um, in real estate, the marketplace itself is very protected, right?
mhm,
Certain agents, certain agencies have like exclusive access to things pre-market. There's a
mhm,
lot of like closed doors, a lot of like centralization and like who has like the hottest um, properties and
mhm,
things like that. And this is problematic, right?
mhm.
Let's say I'm a real estate agent. I'm starting out my career and I don't have access to any of this. I have to basically work for practically nothing to like sign on at properties with like a real estate agent who's just going to use me to get their coffee essentially. And like, and this whole
Yeah,
system
really. Yeah.
is exactly how it works, where you have to work for 10, 15 years and actually sell. I mean, you have to sell the whole time to even make it in an industry like that because of the centralization and the unfair distribution of wealth and even in that job. And so imagine a real estate industry that's decentralized, where every real estate agent has equal access to the same like transparent marketplace, where fractional investing and fractional ownership can exist. Where like, let's say instead of a building having building management, everybody who lives in that building, instead of paying rent, you're paying your fractional share of that building.
Ownership of that building.
And it's
Yeah.
completely fair. It's completely transparent. Somebody's not getting like a better deal than somebody else because of
Mhm,
some connection, right? Like this is where you start removing the unfair inequalities that exist in our system
mhm,
because so many people can profit off of the brokenness of it.
mhm.
And you start fixing that and patching that so that people have equal access and equal ownership.
Right. Alex, we have a question from Michigan. A young lady wants to know, Janice, wants to know if you can elaborate on how transparency reduces costs to everyday citizens. Isn't there always going to be a way to bake in hidden costs? Uh, and how does blockchain prevent, minimize, or help us to avoid these hidden costs? I think we talked about that a little bit, but you want to elaborate on that a little more?
Yeah, so I'll use like air freight shipping is a really good example. So right now, let's say I have a bunch of bananas that I need to ship to Oregon. Okay, and I live in Chicago, and I got to get my bananas over there. Well, I'm going to use unused cargo space on a plane, maybe, and 60 or 70% of cargo space on planes, probably more now, goes completely unused. So this is a good option for me.
Mhm.
The problem is that there's all sorts of paperwork and complexities around how you're allowed to do that. There's bill of lading. There's like all these archaic ways of like even getting your stuff there and getting
Got to
approved
be
to ship it.
inspected before it leaves and when it gets there. And
Right. And so what's easier for me is to call a broker. So I call a shipping broker and he says, all right, I've got all the prices here. Here's how much I'm going to handle A to Z for you. You don't have to handle bill of lading. You don't have to deal with anything. You get me your bananas. I'm going to pick up your bananas probably. I have the shipping service. I'll get it from your door to whatever door you're shipping it to in Oregon. And this is my flat rate. Well, this is a problem, right? It works, but I don't know how much it actually is costing him. I don't know what he's charging on top of it. I don't know what other deals he has in the back with like maybe a certain airline or like anything like that.
Mhm.
All of this is happening behind the scenes, and all I know is the price that he's quoting me. So I can call a couple other people. I can price shop with different brokers. There is some competition there, but really when you look at how many brokerage companies there are in something like that, there's not that much competition. And so this is where blockchain comes in. This is where transparency comes in. Let's say instead of me having to pay a premium for some guy in the middle to handle all this for me, let's say all that paperwork is on the blockchain, my verification's on the blockchain. What is in the parcels of it's a payload that's passed on the blockchain as part of the transaction. And let's say all of that pricing information is visible to me because it's not owned by some central institution or central person who has paid for some service that he can see it with the airlines.
Mhm.
Let's say this whole system of shipping something as an individual who's selling bananas, all of it is public because it's decentralized. It's owned by all of us who use it and not a select few in the middle who take advantage of it. And that's really where that difference comes in, where I can see the pricing and all of the logistics of how I even I execute my plan. All of those things are baked into the same system, and they're immediate, and they're like, it's fluid, it's transactable, it's verifiable, it's immediately processed. And that's like a really cool thing to think about for the future for these industries that are bombarded with middlemen.
Right, right. And another thing that comes to mind, if you talk about we talked about that example in the music, but for instance, in investing, you you save, you can have 50 grand, 100 grand in a bank, and you get what, 0.2% interest or something ridiculous. You might get a whole percent if you leave it in there for a year. Well, they take that same money and they may be getting 80, 90%.
Yeah, you don't know what they're doing with it, what the returns are.
Yeah.
You don't even know how much of it they actually have kept of your original money.
Yeah. Because if you try to if you got $20 million in a bank, we talked about this before, and you go try to get it out, you probably won't be too successful because they don't have the money, because the reserve requirement is only 10%. So they've loaned 90% of your money out, and they don't actually have it anymore. But, for instance, if you say you want to invest your own money, you could do it with blockchain. You could purchase, like you say, smart contracts. You could buy Bitcoin, or you could buy cryptocurrency, and you could do what's called staking it. Is you could loan it to somebody for a predetermined interest rate, which is usually around what, 8 to 10%, I think.
Yeah, there's
it
like
depends.
it really ranges. Yeah.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, but you could do much better because you would take all the middlemen out of the equation. You wouldn't have to pay the guy at the bank who does the paperwork. You wouldn't have to pay the stockbroker. You wouldn't have to pay the stock trader. You wouldn't have to pay the hedge fund guy that really owns the company. And you would get all that interest from that savings or that investment that's due to you.
Right.
So once you start taking the middleman out of the equation, see, all that money goes to you, because on a blockchain, it's you and someone on the other end of that chain. It's you here, there's a chain of someone on the other end of that chain, and you have an agreement, and that's where the money goes, is back to you, from them to you, or you to them. And there's nobody in the middle. So it takes a lot of the so-called hidden costs out of the equation. There's another question about surveillance capitalism. Is Amazon, everything is now based on digital data, right? Well, surveillance capitalism, that's a true statement, but believe me, it's more than just Amazon. It's Zoom, the platform we're on now. It's TikTok.
Yeah.
It's Instagram. It's all, any platform nowadays is using
it's
data.
Physical store. When you go in a physical store, there's beacons, there's things tracking. Like if you, let's say at Walmart, I have like a card I have like a Walmart membership card or something.
Mm-hmm.
I walk in, they can know who I am by my card when I walk in. They can even recognize faces that are stored. When you agree to terms for membership cards and things like that, you really don't know what type of technology is working inside of that building that they don't even have to tell you about. So you can walk into a Walmart, they recognize your face, they recognize you have your card on. They are recording you picking up and putting things down, what those things are, where you go throughout the store. Literally your actions inside of stores, especially these stores that have the money for this technology right now and who profit, like Walmart right now is no longer a physical store company. Walmart is not just a retailer. Walmart knows that to survive and to compete with Amazon, it has to also be a data company. It has to also be a technology company. Domino's is not a pizza company. Domino's is not a real estate company. Domino's is a technology company. And so, because Domino's thrives on the data of knowing how to sell more pizza to you by recording every step of the process, knowing where you live, knowing what types of things you order, all of these things. When you put that app on your phone, you are agreeing to them storing as much as they can about you to know how you and all of your behaviors and everything you do relates to you buying pizza and when you buy pizza and what drives you to buy pizza, right? The perfect conditions for you to buy pizza. And that's like, that's really at the heart of like this surveillance capitalism thing, is like things you don't even think about as you're doing it are going into a database somewhere and being stored. And then once in that database, it's being analyzed. There's some job running every night that like consolidates all of that and breaks things into categories, puts you into a category, recognizes certain patterns in that category, and based on the new patterns that may be present, it starts grouping you in new ways and trying new things on you and seeing if those things work or not. I mean, A/B testing, for example. A/B testing is simply like, I have a group A and group B or group C or group D on an app. And I'm going to, let's say for group A, I'm going to put the button here. And for group B, I'm going to put the button here. Which one spends more money? And that's a really simple example, but some of these things are way more complex in terms of how they even run tests on you to know what little behaviors constantly make them more money. And they start grouping your data based on that. And let's say group A spent way more money when they move the button. Well, now everybody's group A. And then they're running a new test, right? Companies like Amazon are running hundreds of tests at any given moment, perhaps thousands. All these companies are doing even things like that, where you don't even realize you're being tested.
No. Yeah, Pokemon Go. I think we talked about that before.
Yep.
You know, and if anyone didn't see the show, basically what it is Pokemon Go was a game, a kid's game where they had to find Pokemon. But the game beneath the game was an experiment that Amazon did on how to move people in certain directions. So it's gone beyond advertisers. Not only can I give Alex coupons, but I can actually place them in your store whenever you want them there.
Yeah.
You know, and then
if it's not immediately clear how they're making money, it's probably your data somehow.
Yeah, it's probably your data. Yeah. So that was an experiment to determine how they could place people physically and in certain areas where they want them to be. It was, I mean, that's a pretty crazy experiment. Facebook's now, it has some research on some glasses that actually read your brain waves, and which is like really, really getting some next level stuff. I don't know. And usually when you hear about something like this, it's usually a little further along in development than you would think. So,
well, Amazon's Neuralink is being produced right now to help people, right? The way it's being branded is like, oh, it's going to help people walk again. It's going to help people see again. It's going to help people with any sort of like disability. It's going to like help people with mental conditions, all this stuff. But like, what is the long-term plan there in terms of like Neuralink? Or not, this is Elon Musk's Neuralink. So like, what is Elon Musk's Neuralink going to do? What is the end game for that? And honestly, it's probably something data related. It's probably like, how do we connect people to some broader system that recognizes human behaviors and that we profit off of that somehow, right? I mean, it's just the logical trajectory for, the moment there's investors involved. Let's say Elon Musk doesn't care about that stuff, which I think he does, but let's say he doesn't. But he's not the only one putting money into Neuralink, right? When you have other investors, you have like all these minds in the room who are going to be making billions from something. And the whole reason they're still spilling money into it before it's profitable is because it's going to make them money somehow. Well, it's not just going to make money from the 10 people who buy one when it launches, right? There's a long-term goal here of like, how do we store the data from somebody's brain, right?
Yeah, and how do we correlate brainwave activity with behavior?
Right.
And then the next step is, can we manipulate brainwave activity to manipulate behavior? We already know we can place Alex in the store, but can we make him spend money that he doesn't have?
Right.
Can
or
we
trigger him to buy something? Let's say we have a company that is giving us more money to get their product bought. Well, now we can do more than placement, right? We can literally have somebody buy that thing that they were maybe going to think about. Now
And
we
they
can
get home,
actually,
and they say, "What the hell did I buy this for?" Yeah.
maybe that's Target's secret. Maybe it's already been happening to us because every time I go to Target, I end up with way more things than I went there for.
Well, one thing I know for a fact, I did my own experiment at Target. If you look at something on the app at home and you go to the store and look at it on the app, there's two different prices.
Yeah, that's the beacon. Yeah, that's the beacon stuff we talked about. Yeah.
It's cheaper if you're at home than when you get in the store. Because when you get in the store, there's a higher probability you'll buy it if they do something like send you a coupon.
And there's a higher probability, and you can spend more money at the same time because there's such a high probability you're going to buy it anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll milk it.
Yeah. So what you do is you see it you buy it on the internet, and then you go pick it up, and you'll get a lower price than if you go to the store and actually buy the same item. And it's crazy how they do that, because I was looking for some dumbbells. I'm like, they got the price on them. Well, how can they be a different price than what I saw on the internet? And sure enough, I mean, at the store they were more expensive. So it's stay tuned, stay tuned. Surveillance capitalism is here to stay. Data collection is here to stay. And I think the reason, because economic systems are inherently political systems. And I think the reason you haven't seen, when you had the, back in the 1910, 1920, where John D. Rockefeller owned 98% of oil production in the world. That's clearly a monopoly. I remember when they broke up, what was it? Was it AT&T? But what was the company?
Bell was it like?
Yeah, Bell. Yeah, Bell Telephone.
Bell.
Yeah, Bell Telephone. They had every phone in the whole world or the country. They broke them up. But there was a appetite and there was a desire to sort of level the playing field and make it more competitive. But I think the situation you have now is that a lot of elected officials, I mean, some of them are really not that bright. I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there. Zuckerberg, the first time he testified on Capitol Hill, he couldn't believe that some of the senators weren't even familiar with the internet. And they're trying to tell him about surveillance capitalism. And see, this data thing is so far ahead of most elected officials, and they don't really get it. So it's not that they've been reluctant to address some of the inequities, with legislation, is that they don't even understand it.
Just over their head, right? Most people in elected positions are not qualified in most of the subjects that they govern, right? Just like the talking heads on the news are not qualified usually to go through these like weird recursive conversations that they have when they bring experts on, and then like those experts and them have the same conversation essentially over and over again 4 times so they can fill airtime. And none of them on there are qualified to even be discussing that subject.
and it's really, it's really amazing. I had a short conversation with an elected official regarding surveillance capitalism a couple months ago, and it was like it was totally foreign. I don't know. I guess there's an education process that has to take place.
Right.
But I think as people become more aware of what's going on, I think maybe some of those people will get elected to office, if they.
That's why these conversations are really important, right? It's like, because so many people in the crypto space, and you and I were talking about this the other night, like so many people in the crypto space are having conversations for themselves, right? They're just like sitting around talking about the things that they care about and so proud of themselves of look at what we've built, right? And the problem is that doesn't make change, right? That makes you super proud of yourself. It makes you a lot of money right now. Great. But that doesn't change people's lives, right? That doesn't bring access. That doesn't get elected officials to understand enough to pass the right policies to protect us. And so I think you're spot on when you say like this stuff isn't going away, right? We're only progressing. Our connection to technology, the blurring of those lines, the blurring of the physical and the digital world, like all those things are only going to grow. Where we have the opportunity to make a difference is in terms of how do we own that, right? Who is in charge of the revolution? Like,
Mhm.
who actually has the autonomy in that situation to say, this is my data, this is what's happening with it. I understand that this is important for this reason, or this, my healthcare data needs to be here for this reason. I understand these things, and I have the ownership over it to be properly compensated in an economy where so many people probably won't even have jobs to begin with. And
Mhm.
that's really where we have to make change, right? We have to make change in terms of the flow of data, and the flow of ownership over that data, and the flow of compensation for that data. And that's really at the heart of, I think, this conversation.
Yeah. And I think Apple taking this first step. This is an important step
Yeah.
because it's gonna, I'm sure they're still gonna make their money, and maybe, I don't know, for all I know, maybe they want to do some of the things that Facebook is doing. Maybe they'll come out with their own platform,
We'll see. Yeah.
on the iPhone. I wouldn't, that's not beyond belief, but I think it's a good first step. And I think as more people become aware of surveillance capitalism and the acquisition of data, and the thing that to me is most insidious is that they do it without your knowledge. Like, why does the Nest thermostat need a microphone? So it can hear
Right.
what the hell you're saying. And that's data collection. Why did Ford Motor Company say, well, we could lower the price on our cars by 20% and still be a very profitable company? Because when you're in your car, where else could you collect more data than in someone's car?
Right.
Because you're in your car, you feel like, you're by yourself. Nobody can hear what you say. Nobody can, but, there's a lot of, even like Tiger Woods, they said, he was doing twice the speed limit and didn't put on the brakes. He hit a tree doing 75 miles an hour and then tumbled. They knew all this from the black box. And
Right.
that's just all their tons. Probably some other stuff they knew. They might have known what he was talking about,
Yeah.
So data collection is here to stay, but I think it's gotta be sort of reeled in, like when you
Yep.
go fishing, you gotta reel it in,
Right.
before it gets too far.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a great conversation today, and again, this is the DeFi Collective. And if you have any questions, we can be reached at the DeFi Collective at gmail.com. That's the DeFi, DEFI Collective at gmail.com. We can be found at Let's Talk Radio with a Y, RADYO, on YouTube. And again, that's myself, Robert Vaughn, and Alex Jewell, saying protect your data and get paid for what's yours. Does that sum it up?
It's a summary.
That's so. And as we move forward, we'll be covering. I think from now on, every week we're going to give some practical examples, because we've gotten a lot of feedback that people say, well, what is this DeFi? What does it mean to me? I'm in the construction business. And I think next week we're going to talk about an actual case that Alex worked on dealing with construction. And
Yeah, we were talking about that one.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that next week.
Cool.
Well, until then, thank you. Our time is up, and we thank you for yours. So, Alex, you got anything to say in closing?
No, I think this was good. We got a lot of a lot of good examples, and we'll continue to hash through those examples, because ultimately what people care about is like how it affects me, right? What does this mean for me? So I think that's really going to be the how we focus around our discussions.
Okay, great. Well, I would just close by saying, wear your mask, stay safe, and we'll see you next week. Bye now.
Bye, everybody.